Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session, Intro to Modus 2. Thanks for joining. My name is Patrick Higaki. I handle sales and marketing here at Modus. Joining me today is Riley Parrott from our client services team, as well as one of our co-founders, Ken Brick. We will wait just a few minutes to let all the AI bots join, and then we will get underway. I see Anthony is out there. Hey, Anthony. How are you? We got a heart from Anthony. It might just be you, Anthony. I know a lot of people registered with the intention of watching a recording. So we'll see how that goes. It could be a really interesting training. Or you can just be our plant in the audience and ask all the questions that you want to ask, Anthony. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and maybe people will trickle in as we get going. I'll hand over the keys to the kingdom to Ken, as we've got a lot to cover and not a lot of time.
Great. Okay. Thanks. Webinar today is going to be covering the basics of Modus 2. We're going to build out a really simple conference room. Along the way, I'll share lots of hotkeys and tips and
Oh,
Did Ken freeze
might
for
have
you,
lost
Riley?
Ken. Yep.
He was going to say tips and tricks. That's my assumption. Let me message him and see if his computer if his computer shut down. He's typing. His computer just restarted. So one tip is don't start a webinar while your computer is going to restart. He will be right back. So I think covering tips and tricks and basics of room building. We will go through how to get going and mostly listening on transit. Okay, no worries, Anthony. Thanks for letting us know. Um, but mainly just the essentials of Modus, how to get your starting points, going through some of the controls, um, all of the essentials you need to know for basic usage. We do also have two other trainings scheduled this month. So we do have an advanced session later this week on Thursday. And Riley, could you post the link for that one in chat?
Yep.
I think that'll show up on the recording for folks. And then we have one later in the month that's actually focuses on deliverables and documentation. So those are two that you should definitely register for, whether you've seen this one or not. Those are both key for continuing your Modus journey, if you will. So we'll just give Ken a minute to get back because he's going to be doing all the screen sharing side of things. But please do register for those other two webinars. The advanced one is certainly the next step after this particular getting started one. And then the one that we're doing on the 20th is a brand new session that really is completely focused on Modus docs, photos, and 360. So what to do with Modus files after you've created spaces. Let me just see how much longer Ken has on his ETA. I don't think he wants me to start working on actually building a room. But we can cover a couple other places to get help and resources as well. So we do have a user forum up and running, and that is a great place to share ideas and files, etc. And that is, Riley, do you have a link for that one handy?
Yep. I'm grabbing it right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
You will have to register via the account.
You do have to
page.
register, and you do need a Modus account to join the forums. That is correct. It looks like we had Gustavo just joined. Thanks for joining. Our presenter is rebooting his computer. It restarted on him unexpectedly right as he started talking. So we're just buying time at the moment. But yeah, forums is a great place to share ideas, ask for help. But a lot of our users kind of talk to each other, and there is even an area for sharing custom 3D files. It's been pretty well received. So outside of that, we do have the standard methods. So you can always contact our support email, which is support@modusvr.com. And that's at any time that you need help, whether it's basic stuff like how do I do certain things in Modus, or even if you want to schedule some one-on-one trainings, we're happy to help with getting our users up and running. But again, today's session is going to be just covering the basics. So we will get into a basic room. I'm hoping he's saying 2 to 3 minutes of boot up time. That seems lengthy, but hopefully he's in here in just a minute. But with that, I will Guess I'll launch Modus, and hopefully my computer doesn't restart when I do this. There's Ken. Well, welcome back, Ken.
Yeah, it's good to be here
Good to be here
again.
All right, I was
Nervous
just getting ready to
about
launch Modus and start showing, but are you up and capable now?
I'm up. I don't know if I'm capable. So did you
All
already
right.
cover launcher and everything?
We just kind of talked through what the presentation was going to
Okay.
cover, and then where to get help and support because I didn't know how far into things I wanted to get before you came back.
Yeah, well, I guess be ready to jump in again. I don't know
All
what's
right.
going on. So, hey, Modus is really broken up into two different applications. You have the launcher, which is this red and white application here, and then you have Modus itself, which you start via the launcher. I'm not going to spend too much time on the launcher today, but there are a few critical components. On the home tab, we have the latest news section. This is always just giving you a feature dump of what's in the latest release, which is really handy. Whenever a new update for Modus comes out, you'll see a big blue banner at the top here, as well as a little notification in the bottom left. You typically want to stay up to date on the latest and greatest. We have all sorts of bug fixes, stability increases, performance increases, and new features. Running through these tabs really quick, the Files tab is where you can manage all of your projects. This also correlates just to a folder on your desktop. If you click this little icon up here, you can get to that as well if you prefer to do things in File Explorer. 360s, this is important. This is where all of your 360s can be found once you have generated them. We'll talk about generating 360s in a future webinar, but the main thing is once you get into 360 mode and create one, they are hosted online, and this is where you find them. Settings has some really basic stuff. Usually you don't have to touch this, but there is an important one where you can change your default project folder if you wanted to move that somewhere else, and then some helpful videos to get you started. Finally, in the bottom left corner, we also have a link to the forums and to the issue reporter. Both of those are super helpful, and they're a great way for you to provide feedback or let us know of any issues you've run into. Now, getting started with Modus, there's a couple, really just one important concept, and that is of sessions. So by default, Modus is a multi-user application. And so creating a session is very similar to creating a video call for Teams or Zoom or something like that. But you also use a session when you are working solo. If you'd like other people to be able to join you, reach out to support@modusvr.com. We can help you through that process. But for now, we're just going to click on default session to launch Modus. But if you do have other people in your organization you want to work with, or any Modus user in any organization, sessions are the means in which you would do that. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Modus here now that it's done launching. And we're going to do a few things right off the bat to help you get started and maximize your experience in Modus. So the very first thing you want to do is adjust your UI scale. So in the top left corner here, we have settings, UI scale. And I'm going to crank this up to be quite a bit larger than I normally do just for the sake of the webinar. But you're going to do this, set this to whatever you find comfortable. While we're in settings, also take note of controls. There are a few that you can change, but more important, it's just good to know what hotkeys are available. And so Patrick and Riley, if you could also toss in the printed hotkey cheat sheet into chat, that would be great as well. I can't stress this enough. The sooner you learn the hotkeys, the more efficient you will be in Modus, which is really, really important because Modus can be lightning fast once you have learned all of the hotkeys. All right, so the second thing in terms of getting stuff set up is the viewport quality. So I came into this room and it is almost pitch black. And that's because we have no lights in the room and we are simulating pretty high quality lighting. So I'm going to go up to this top right corner where it says very high, and that might say medium or something for you. But basically, this is the quality in which Modus is rendering while you are working in Modus. So if we drop this down into the medium, the lighting that gets created here is of much lower precision. In fact, you'll even have a perfectly bright room with no lights in it. And so this is a great way to get started, but also this is a great way to control the performance requirements of Modus. If you're in a lower quality mode, you're going to have better performance because your computer's not doing as much. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk a little bit about is navigation. Now that you have your viewport and UI set up, basically, there are two modes in Modus. There is interaction mode, where I'm working with menus, maybe dragging objects around, and then there is navigation mode. To get into navigation mode, I can press M, and that hides my menu, and now I can look around, or I can just hold the right mouse button to temporarily get into navigation mode, and that's all I'm going to be doing throughout the rest of the webinar, is just holding that right mouse button. Once you're holding the right mouse button, you're going to look around by moving the mouse around, and then you go forward and backward by pressing W and S. You go side to side by pressing A and D, and you go up and down by pressing space and shift. And so you'll get really comfortable with those over time, but that is it. So again, hold right mouse button to enter navigation mode, and then W, A, S, and D to go forward, back, left, and right, and then space and shift to go up and down. And that's it for navigation mode. So now taking a look at the UI here for a moment, in the top left corner, we've got design mode. That's where we're going to spend the entirety of the webinar. But if you switch over to photo or 360, which we'll cover in our in an upcoming webinar in a couple of weeks, that's where you can generate high quality renders or 360s. Up along the top here, we have lots of buttons for changing modes, deleting, duplicating, turning into arrays, stuff like that. And we'll kind of cover these throughout the webinar as we go. And on the left side, we have all of our main tabs here for working with the project. So first things first, I'm going to change the dimensions of this project. We're going to operate in feet, inches, so I don't need to change this, but this is where you would do it if you wanted to work in metric. But let's change this to be, we'll make it 18 feet wide by 23 feet, and then we'll increase the ceiling height to 10 feet. It's going to fade down, fade back up, and now our room is slightly different. Now I'd like to spend a little bit of time dressing the room, getting it ready to add equipment. This part isn't critical, but it does really help sell the story. And so with Modus, it is such a fast tool. It is AV focused. You can bring it into basically any scenario where seeing or validating results is going to be helpful. So for example, we see Modus used a lot in pre-sales or even just in conceptualization, trying to see if a certain idea will work, all the way through to generating really polished, high quality deliverables that might go in a room standards package or something like that. Really, it's up to you in terms of how much time you want to spend on any given project, but we think it's usually best to try and spend as little time as possible. Really be disciplined about how many details are important. But to get started, I'm going to select all these walls. I'm going to control click and move around to select all four. And I'm going to come over to the properties panel. To get to that, I just hover over the right side of the screen, and the properties panel is going to change based on what you have selected. So in this case, I have 4 walls selected, which gives me options for the walls. I'm going to turn off the trim and baseboard. We're going to keep the material the same, but I am going to change the color so that they are all white. Now I'm going to click on the floor to select it. I'm going to change its material. When I click on that, by default, I'm going to see what just kind of the suggested options for this. But if I wanted to change this to something else, I could hover over here and go up a level and find hundreds of different materials to choose from. But I'm just going to select that carpet, and then I'm going to make our ceiling a drop ceiling. I'm going to pick the 24-inch version since we are doing this stateside for now. Let's start dressing the room. So I'm going to come over to our objects tab. Modus is a object-based workflow, meaning we're not dealing really with low-level vertices or lines. We are bringing in functional objects. So I'm going to type in window here, and I'm just going to drag one in and stretch it out. You'll notice a few things that happen right away. Anytime an object has these little cubes, those are resize handles. So I can grab them, and maybe we'll make this glass fill the entire wall. Now I'm going to go to the properties panel and see what options I have available here. So these are going to be very different than the ones we've seen so far. And I'm going to change the dividers up just to change the way that looks a little bit. And we're going to keep the metal the same, but I want to change the glass to something transparent so we can see outside. This is the first bit of outside that we've seen, and this mountainscape doesn't really match what we would want to show in a commercial environment. So to change that, I'm going to go back to the project tab. I'm going to change our environment from mountains to, we'll do waterfront. We can rotate that a little bit. Okay, so that gives us a little bit nicer of a view. Okay, now let's add some lights to the room. So I'm going to go back to the Objects tab, and instead of typing, we're going to navigate. We're going to come over to Lighting, and then we'll do Drop Ceiling LED. So I'm going to toss this on the ceiling. Again, I'm going to resize it here a little bit. And since we're working on a 24-inch by 24-inch grid, I really don't want this free resizing. I'd rather it snap to something more useful. So I come up here to incremental moving and sizing. I'm going to enable that. And by default, it's going to set me up to 1-inch increments, but I'm going to put it over to 6. So now when I resize, it's going to snap the dimensions of this object to the closest 6 inches. So now I can get that right where I want it. And now we need to create multiples of this light. So we've got a handful of ways that we could do that. One, I could just select it and then do Control C and Control V, and that's going to put a light fixture wherever my mouse cursor is. I'm going to hit Control Z a handful of times to undo that. But in this case, I really want to arrange these in a grid and not have to place each one manually. So for that, I'm going to use an array. So I could press Control A, or I can click this button up in the UI. Once I've created an array of that object, now the thing I have selected is an array, not the light. The light is the reference for building out the array. I'm going to back up here a little bit, get to a slightly better spot. And we know which one is our reference object because it's full color, and then any copy or clone kind of has this grayish tint to it. But let's say we wanted to have 2 lights along the width of the room and then 3 rows along the length. So I've just updated this, but it's shooting off in the wrong direction. So I want it to be coming towards us rather than away from us. So on the red axis, I'm going to come click flip direction. And now they're in the right direction, but the spacing is wrong. So I'm going to change spacing to 4 feet. Let's see how that looks. And let's change that to maybe 8. There we go. And spacing this way, we'll try 4 feet and see how that does not work. Try 6 feet. Okay. All right, that works. So once again, now that we have an array of multiple clones, we can see which one was the reference object. That is the one that all of these clones are created from. And then when I deselect the array, when I select something else, they will now all look normal. Okay, so now our room is pretty well lit. And at this point, now that we have lights in the room, I actually want to switch back to a higher quality viewport mode. So I'm going to come up to the top right corner, and we'll bring this over to high, or even very high. Now, once we're in this mode, the change right now is a little bit subtle, but as we add objects into the room, we'll start to see some nice shadows. But one change we can see immediately is sunlight. So to change that, I'm going to come over to this lighting tab. And the lighting tab is what allows you to control just the overall look and feel of the room with anything respect to lighting. So very first thing we're going to do is we want to rotate the sun so it's actually coming and shining into the room here. So we have 2 controls for changing the direction of the sun. So this is basically the sun's orbiting around the Earth, and then this one is the sun's elevation. So if we pull the elevation down, we're going to get nice long shadows. If we want it to splash onto a different wall, we'd rotate it. But I'm going to have it splash onto the front wall because that is such a pesky problem once it lands on a screen. So it's really important to bring that up. And then for artistic reasons, you can increase the brightness or temperature of the sun as well. But usually the defaults are pretty good. And the sunlight only shows when you are in one of those higher quality viewport modes. Same thing with when you're doing renders or 360s. Okay, so with our room set up decently well, I'm going to save this really quick, just in case we have another unfortunate accident. You can choose screenshot location, and then we're off to the races. Okay, so let's start adding some furniture. I'm going to come back to furniture, tables and desks, and we will add a salamander trapezoid table. So I'm going to put this in place. You notice it's facing the wrong direction. I can use my mouse wheel to rotate the direction it's facing, or I can switch to a more explicit rotation mode with my cursor. So right now we are in resize mode, as indicated by having these handles. And I'm in fact going to turn off incremental sizing here for a moment. But we can also switch to rotation mode by pressing R, and that gives us a much more fine-grained amount of control over the rotation. While we're looking at this, if I wanted to, I could actually click on this and enter an explicit value, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to use my mouse wheel, get this in place, and we're in pretty good shape, but this table is not quite the size we want. So I'm going to press E to go to resize mode. And something interesting is going to happen here. As I resize this table, you'll notice that it is snapping to different lengths. If I compare that with a generic table, this starts to show us a really interesting concept in Modus. When I have a generic table in there, I can resize it fluidly to any dimension I want. I can come to the properties panel and I can make it any material I want. I could make it out of felt, I can make it out of brick. We can do any absurd thing we want because it's generic. Real world products like this salamander table or any other branded product in Modus is restricted in the options presented to you. So you can never build something or configure something that you couldn't actually buy it. So when I come to the materials options of this table, I only have the options that Salamander sells. I can't configure this to look like it's made of brick or felt. Same thing with the cabinet options. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to delete that generic table, but it's important to understand that duality of real world manufactured products and generic infinitely flexible products exists across all product categories. So cameras, microphones, couches, you name it. We often have both generic and real world products. Okay, so in this case, I've moved the table off to the side, but I want to bring it back to the center of the room, but I don't want to change its offset from this front wall. And that's where we get to axis movement mode. So we've been in resize and rotate. Axis movement mode gives us a different set of handles. So if I grab this table just anywhere on the top, I can move it around freely. But if I grab it on one of these arrows, I can only move it along that arrow's axis. And so this is a great way to have a little bit more control over your movement. I'm going to slide it over until the center until it snaps into place. We're not going to talk a ton about snapping, but the core concept behind snapping is it's all based on rulers. So when this snaps to the center of the room, what it's actually doing is snapping in between two objects on both sides. So snapping is really based on when these ruler values match, or when these ruler values become 0, they will snap to that surface. You can control all of those things up here in the snapping options. You can change which axes are responding to snapping rules, or you could click that button to disable all snapping completely. Finally, you could also hold Shift temporarily while you're dragging to disable snapping. Okay. How are we doing on time and questions? Do we have any questions so far?
No questions yet, but I will mention, and I guess I failed to mention this while we were waiting for you to reboot, that we will answer questions live. So please, Gustavo and Anthony is riding. He's on the train, so he said he's just listening. But if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them live, and we will do our best to answer them in line.
Please do.
And time, we are 25 minutes in.
Okay, great.
So you got another 20.
All right. So I'm going to bring in some chairs here. Just going to drag one in, use my mouse wheel to rotate. And then another quick way to copy items. So I could Control C and Control V to toss these wherever I want, but then it's sometimes a little hard to know where they're going to end up. You can also hold Alt and drag. And then every time you redo that operation, you're going to get a new version of that object. And then mouse wheel to rotate. It's a really quick and easy way to get multiple copies of something out there. And I made this table too long. Let's shrink it a hair. One more back there. Okay, good. And a door. Oh no, that's unfortunate. We really need a door. Okay. All right, so I'm going to quick save again. Now we'll start talking about AV equipment, because this is really where Modus sets itself apart from all of the other applications out there, because this is built specifically for the AV industry. So I'm going to bring in just a flat panel TV. And some objects, like displays, may have additional resize handles. In this case, displays can be resized from any corner. And when I resize a display, it's going to maintain that aspect ratio that it has been set to. But it's really helpful when you have content playing, or it's really helpful when you're resizing a display to have content playing. That's where we come to the media tab. So I'll cover this as quickly as I can, but there's a lot of layers to media in Modus, but it's most important to understand the paradigm. So the media tab lets you push content into a channel, and we support 5 channels that playback media. So you push content into a channel, and then a display chooses which channel to subscribe to. And that combination allows you to have multiple displays showing different content, but also being able to synchronize content between displays. By default, all displays tune in to channel 1. So if we start playing this gallery plus content, for example, and when I hover it over it, it's going to ask me which channel I want to play it on. I'm going to click on channel 1, and now it starts playing content right there. Now, let's say that we wanted to do dual displays instead of just a single. So I'm going to use the axis arrow just to move it over some. And then just as before, when I held Alt to create a copy of the chairs, you can also hold Alt while you're dragging on an arrow, and that will make the copy stay on that axis, which is really handy. But now we're in a situation where both of these displays are not only showing the same content, they're also not even centered on the wall. So I'm going to control click the second one. And in order to move them as a unit, we need to group them. Grouping is something you can do up here in the UI by pressing group, or you can simply press Control G. And once you do that, now these displays move as one unit. And so I'm going to simply grab the axis arrow, move it over until it snaps in the middle. So that solves the first problem. Now the second problem is we need to have each of these displays showing different content. So I'm going to shift click to select the display inside a group. Otherwise, it'll just select the entire group. Or I can come to the properties panel and select it like that. What we want is for this display to tune in to as if it were a left display, and we want this right display to behave as if it was a right display. A lot of the media in Modus, particularly those that have this little black and blue banner here, can do some pretty interesting things. It's not just static video. And so in this particular case, when I come to the display properties, you'll see I can change all sorts of things. I could change its aspect ratio. We could arbitrarily set it to a custom size instead of the random 77.1 inches I picked. We could also have it tune in to different channels, which is what you would normally do if you want 2 completely different content types playing. But in this case, we're going to use what's called a sub-channel. To get to sub-channels, you expand this channel options section here, and we can change the sub-channel. Right now, it's saying, I want you to tune in to the single display content of Teams front row. That's the media that we're playing. If I expand this, I can now instead say, hey, tune into the left channel feed or left sub-channel feed of the Teams video. And I can select this video or this display and do something similar, but set it to the right. And so now we have a great example of what a left and right setup of Microsoft Teams would look like. But now, since these 2 displays are set up to be the left and right, when I come and play something else, like let's say we wanted to show WebEx, the home screen experience, we could click on that, and now they still maintain their left and right screen relationship, but I can only change, instead of having to change independent channels, I can just change one channel for it. Okay, with that set up, I'm going to move this up just a hair, and we're going to start adding some other AV equipment. We'll bring in a video bar for now, and we'll do the Venture video bar. This was just recently added to Modus. As I'm dragging this around, you'll notice we also get these blue swirly things showing up below displays. What that means is those are snap points, where if I bring this display to it, it'll snap right onto the bottom of that display if I can do it right. There we go. And then that camera will use its display mount. It'll move with the displays, but in this case, we're having it centered between the displays. And this is where Modus can become so powerful and save you so much time in discussions. When we have a camera in Modus, when we come to the properties panel, we can start to see things like a camera preview. Where this becomes even more powerful is if you are showing heads in seats. So to do that, we're going to go to the Assistants tab. We haven't been there yet. The assistants are all about helping communicate good design, but also communicate to your clients why you're making the decisions you are. We're not going to spend a lot of time on these, but we do have all sorts of great ones, even simple things like sight lines. For example, we can tell that these three users are having a hard time seeing this right display, or I'm sorry, the left display, and everyone on the right side can see the left display just fine. But if we come over here, we can start to see exactly the problem. So this is a great way to help troubleshoot different things, brainstorm different solutions. But for now, we're not going to worry too much about any of these specific assistants. And instead, we're just going to do facing screen. So this has everybody facing the screen. And now when we come over to preview our camera view, we can see exactly what this view is going to be like. There's a couple problems here. The biggest being one that we can see under the table. And so this is a really big problem, and we'll workshop solutions for that in just a moment. But I do want to point out really quickly that this is an accurate view of what that camera will show. So for example, we have all of the proper specs for pan, tilt, and zoom, as well as the correct lens behavior. And of course, we can also see exactly what that digital zoom is capable of. If we were to bring in a, let's see, if we bring in like a rally camera, something that has a lot more pan, tilt, and zoom, we can really start to see exactly what that camera is like. Key takeaway here, though, is you can very quickly communicate to your clients why they might want a camera above or below a display, why they might want one model over another, and quickly be able to experience what types of trade-offs might be involved based on those decisions. It also helps a lot if you're doing a multicam system and you need to illustrate what that experience is going to be like, which cameras are going to be looking at which people, and so on. Really powerful. Okay, so let's just say that we're happy with that video bar, though. Let's move over to microphones. So we can start off with a really simple one. I'm actually going to bring in a generic conferencing microphone, and this is where a lot of Modus's visualizations come into play. So with cameras, for example, we can also show the field of view. You can see how well you're doing. You can do the exact same thing with microphones. You can show the pickup pattern. Since it's a generic microphone, we can change the spec. Perhaps we're trying to match a microphone's performance that we don't have the actual product in Modus for some reason or another. There's a great way to do that. But this way we could very quickly determine how many microphones we would need to have proper coverage. And your stakeholders can see that and understand it without getting lost in jargon or anything that specs can often do. But more important, this really helps out with more capable microphones that might have a more complicated story. So for example, the Sennheiser TCC-M. If we were to bring this in addition to looking correct, we can also change its mounting abilities and things like that. But we can show its microphone pattern and show exactly how this microphone is going to behave. So in this case, we'd probably want to bias this forward just a little bit, but at this height, well, even if we were to lower it, we'd probably want to use the TCC2 rather than the TCCM for a room this size. If that's not an option, well, we could also solve our problem by being able to see under the table by moving the table forward and scooching all of these chairs forward as well. Oops. There we go. That actually solves two problems in one. Now we can't see under the table, and we're just barely within that microphone stated pickup pattern. Now here's something interesting though, and this is where Modus can become so powerful. Sometimes when you solve one problem, you introduce another. These two people in the front are clearly way too close to this display, but also they are probably too close for the camera to be able to pick up comfortably. Yeah, they're kind of pushing it. So when I mentioned very early on about Modus being a great tool for validating ideas and brainstorming concepts, this is exactly what I'm talking about, where you can try out a piece of equipment, see how it's going to do, and react to it on the fly. This is often a very powerful thing to do live with the client. So just like I'm showing you, it's really helpful to do with the client watching as well, because they can see things, you can point out problems, or at least let them be aware of the compromises that might be made so they can go into the project eyes wide open. Okay, how are we doing on questions? Are we still all right? Okay, cool. All right, so in our final few minutes here, want to talk a little bit about how you can repurpose these rooms. So our intent in most cases is not that you're starting from scratch with every single room. So I'm going to pull these table and chairs back a little bit because it's kind of silly. Okay, we'll say that this is usable and we'll substitute a different camera. Ideally, you would build up basically template rooms that you would reuse quickly. So in this particular case, let's say this is our medium room and it's our best practices room. This is often the starting point for selling no matter what we do. Great. Now let's imagine a new or prospective client has come in and they want you to do a room standards package. And one of their requirements is a medium-sized room, but theirs is slightly different dimensions, where ours is 23 by 18 by 10. Maybe theirs is 25 by 16 by 9. What you would do in that case is you would open up this project. So this is a new day. You're just opening up this project. And you would come in and you'd say, okay, well, let's change these dimensions. Let's instead make this, I think I said 16 by 25 by 9. And a few things are going to happen. Some stuff is going to shuffle around. Our door is now in the floor just a little bit because we resized the room underneath it. Our table is actually a decent height and our room is narrower, but it still works. And maybe they've got some branding in here. We'll try and match Cisco there just a little bit. That doesn't look great, but that's okay. And maybe it's a hard floor or something like that. And maybe they want to have a different table and they'd rather have I don't know. We'll just toss in a generic conference table. Anyway, so then in just a few moments, you can go from one design to something pretty different in just a matter of a couple of minutes. And that's really where we hope to see our users leveraging the power and speed of Modus the most, is by reusing good design principles across the board, saving time, but ultimately getting the client on the same page about what it is that they are going to receive. And if you can do that quickly, then you can wow your clients because you just gave them bespoke images, but also you're saving yourself a lot of time and headache because you're not having the same conversations over and over. Okay, so that covers all of the material I was hoping to get through in this webinar. Patrick and Riley, is there anything else we want to cover while we are still here?
I think we covered the basics, and again, we will be doing a what to do with these files after you have a room designed later this month on the 20th. I believe, Riley, can you post that back into chat one more time?
Yep.
I hope chat shows up in the recording as well. I think from recollection, it does show up there. Anthony, thank you so much. This was an excellent intro. And Gustavo, I saw that you'd registered while we were kind of midway through the webinar. If you have questions post-webinar, you're going back and watching this and have any questions, please feel free to reach out to support@modusvr.com to get any help you need. But no, I think we're all good. You covered the basics, and you even lost 5 minutes restarting your computer doing it.
I am to please. It's a Cinco de Mayo miracle.
Yeah, the new UI. There are some minor changes. So Anthony, I don't know when the last time you watched one of these was, because I know you've been on at least one of our intro trainings. Yeah, we've tried to refresh things and make sure that every time we change something, we update the syllabus a tiny bit.
Yeah,
but
in
again,
fact, maybe while we're here, we should cover the outliner really quick, just for
yeah, sure.
posterity's sake. So this was added, I think, in January. But the outliner is a quick way to give you an overview of everything in your scene, and it also maintains the hierarchy of that scene. So in this particular case, I have these dual screens. This is actually a group of dual screens selected, and those are mounted to this wall. So I come to the outliner, I can see a breadcrumb indicator to that. I can click the breadcrumb and it'll expand everything to that group. And then if I expand the group, we'll see two displays. But there's some really interesting things you can do with this. For example,
can you rename the displays, Ken?
Let me check. It'd sure be nice if I could just say, right. Oh, yes, I can. You just simply double click the entry. That's new as of last week. Pretty exciting. But then we could also call this, we'll call this dual displays. Now, here's where groups can become really powerful in combination with the outliner. I can hide that entire group. In fact, I'm going to add the video bar to it. And now we'll call this dual display. Okay, so now I can turn that entire thing off, and we could instead perhaps say, what if we also had a video wall up here? And we want to kind of have two different options. We're just doing a good, better, best type of a thing. And let's just say I'll bring the rally cameras back. Okay, so now we've got flanking cameras on a huge display. This is a lot pricier of an option. So we'll call this LED wall. Because both of these are groups, I can come back and forth between these really quickly, which is one great use case for groups and the outliner, just showing and hiding things. There's also a hotkey for showing and hiding, that's Control H. But in addition to that, you can also start doing some really fun things like isometric. So for example, if we wanted to hide this wall, I can press Control H, I can hide the ceiling, press Control H, and hide the back wall, Control H. And by changing the project to perhaps a white background, we now have a pretty cool isometric view. And these are just another great way to be able to present concepts to clients, because they can see everything all at once from the outside. So the outliner offers a lot of power and flexibility. It's super cool. It's still pretty new to us, and we're excited about it. But I would be remiss if we didn't tackle it at all. So I'm glad we had a couple extra minutes there.
Absolutely. We are just about to reach time, and unless there are any other questions, we'll probably release class a little early. But again, thank you for joining today, and we hope to see you on Thursday for the advanced session. Riley, if you could just post that one in a chat one more time. Anthony Blandino says, peace. Deuces. Have a good one, Anthony. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, I guess. And we hope to see everybody on Thursday. And then again, that training later in the month on May 20th as well. So thanks again for joining, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.